Today I'm going to do a review series, or a vehicle review series, or verse as I like to call them, on the Ford pickup truck. I did one on the Chevy a while back, and somebody requested recently that I do one on the Ford, and so I'm going to use this 97 F-250 as a vehicle to use for that. When it comes to reviews, there's a lot of things that are opinions, and the thing you got to bear in mind, as I talk about it, maybe I'll put the truck in the background. The thing you got to realize is these are my opinions, and while I may have a professional opinion because I've worked on so many of these and I know a lot of the background on the company, what's important to a person is going to satisfy their opinion with one thing more than another. For example, if I get a bunch of money, I know what I want to spend it on. I want to spend it on tools and, like trucks and just fun stuff to me. And that's not what my wife would spend the money on. She'd spend it on shoes because that's what makes her happy. She loves shoes and she loves clothes and she loves to travel and do things like that. And so what's important to her opinion and what's important to my opinion are two different things. And that's okay. It's what makes the world go around. That's great. My opinion of Ford trucks is that they're awesome for a business. They're awesome for getting the job done. They're awesome for getting you home. If you want something that you can just run the wheels off of it without putting a lot of investment in maintenance and other things like that, Ford's a pretty good vehicle for that. I mean, the cost of ownership, as a whole, is very low. You can buy a Ford really inexpensively, and typically they don't require a great deal of maintenance. They have breakdowns because they have moving parts and they have materials, and like I say, Ford is a business first and foremost. They stay in the black, they make money, they've been around a long time. They're passionate about business, but as a result of that, they cater more to businesses. You'll notice that a lot of fleet vehicles will be Fords because they really work well with pricing, with product quality and delivery, to cater more to a business. A lot of company cars wind up being a Ford Taurus or something like that. So that's what you'll find, and that's what you get when you buy a Ford. I really like the interior design that Dodge does. I think that they're beautiful. I think the ones that you see in Fords, whether it's the new ones or the older ones, they're kind of copycat and basic, and I wouldn't say that they really cut corners on design, but their design is very basic and very industrial. Like these surfaces, they clean up really easily. I'm trying to share the positives and the negatives, but this isn't gorgeous by any means, but it's very functional. You can get into this vehicle, look at the HVAC controls, and quickly be able to determine how they function. Instead of making it pretty but impossible to figure out how to operate without pulling over on the side of the road and figuring it out, this is it. And that saves companies money because people aren't looking down at the controls trying to figure out, how to get the defrost to work. These employees, they can look at it, bam, done, and that saves you money. It saves you money from having an accident and having downtime and having to pay out. And I mean, like on this steering wheel, the cruise control, it's real easy. The controls on these, it's as easy as can be to just jump in and drive this thing and have everything be real consistent and be able to feel comfortable with how to operate the thing right off the bat. Like on my Dodge, the controls for the radio are clear back here, and they're really ergonomic and really awesome to use that way, and they put so much thought and design in it. But you might own the truck for 3 months before even noticing that they're there. So, as far as another thing that I really like about Fords is when you lock the door, if you pull the handle, bam, you can get out. I really, really like that. There's older trucks and newer trucks, and the newer trucks, if you want the review on when they're new and nobody knows a thing about them other than, what you get at a glance, this isn't the review for you. I like to review the older cars, and if somebody wants to look into these, I've got proven track records on these things, and I have a lot more experience with the older ones, and so that's what this is about. As far as things that I don't like on Fords is I hate the twin I-beam axle. And the reason why I can say that is because I've owned Fords, I've owned Chevys, and the last Ford that I owned that had a twin I-beam axle, it was a nightmare. I had a lift kit on it because I like to clear big tires like you see on that one. But the twin I-beam axle, the advantage to it and the beautiful thing of the twin I-beam axle is the suspension and the ride is so much better because you're pivoting from here clear across, to here. I mean, it's almost like you've got a long arm suspension going from one side to the other. And that does great off-road. It does great, for a lot of things. But when you put a lift kit on these, it's very difficult to do anything without spending a lot of money. The other thing with the twin I-beam axle is oftentimes when you crank the wheel, because of the length and whatever, it causes the wheel, instead of being correct up and down for the camber, it'll lay clear over to the side and just do funky things. Alignments are trickier, more expensive, especially with the coil spring ones. But as far as just being heavy duty, they're pretty heavy duty. Ball joints are expensive to replace. You have radius arm bushings, on a lot of them that go back. This one doesn't because it's got the leaf spring. It's a 3/4 ton, not the 1/2 ton. But I don't know, they're a bugger. I'd rather have a solid axle or something like Chevy did. They did an independent front suspension with torsion bars for a lot of their vehicles. I like that better, and it's hard to compare, one thing to another if the other doesn't exist. There's probably even better ways that haven't even been come up with yet. But as far as the rest of the vehicle, the engines that they use, International Harvester is an awesome engine. They got a real black eye, 2005, 2006 models, because the issues with the lifters coming apart and destroying the engine. The lifters are installed from the bottom, but you want to know what? Chevy's 6-liter and 5.3-liter gas engines, they're built a lot the same way. So, how can you throw rocks one way or the other, because they all kind of do these same things. They have good years and bad years. But these things are not built to be serviced. Some of the labor times are high on Fords. One of my pet peeves with Fords goes back to them just being a business first and a passionate car cultured, people second, is that if they want to change one of the sensors on something, like say they want to, and this is more with the gas motors than the diesel, say they don't like this one or they get a better buy on it later in the year, in the middle of the production year they'll switch over and they'll completely redesign it. That's why you don't want to be a design engineer for Ford. It's because you can be done and be proud of your work and everything. They'll find a cheaper part or a better, something that's more cost effective for them, and that's how they stay in the black. But you can have 3 different campaigns of emissions components or engine controls in the same year, and that makes it a real headache for a couple of reasons. Supply and demand is one of them. When you have a bunch of different things in the same year, you don't have as many of them available. Like Chevy, they're really good about just seeing it through, going. They're most like the white truck company of anybody, but they'll see it through, and in terms of interchangeable parts and parts availability, they'll be available. With Ford, as soon as they don't have to supply that anymore, as soon as the 10 years is up and they're not required by the government to supply parts anymore, they'll sell off stock, and then you may be paying through the nose. Or because it was only used in the middle section of a year and they were doing it, one way, and then they switch to this other way, and then it's not available or something happens or they can't get the supply from their supplier, they'll switch to another one. So that middle one, instead of being a $50 part or a $20 part, it's going to wind up costing you well over $300 to $400, and it's going to be like pulling teeth trying to find one. But as long as you're a corporation and they're buying new vehicles and they don't have to worry about the 10-year thing, or they've got warranties or whatever, the best thing you can buy, in my opinion, is a Ford, because A, you're not going to have to work with it, and if they do have, like in the 0506 campaign with those International Harvesters, I believe it was the 6.0 or 5, whatever it was. It's either a 5-liter or 6-liter. I mean, like, they recalled the whole ambulance package and, took the body off and, swapped out the whole, I mean, they took care of people. That's what I want to say. So, that's, kind of an International Harvester problem, but Ford took care of it. They stood behind their product. So that's something to be aware of. Another thing that I really like is mechanical springs, and this is kind of an old thing, but it worked for Ford for so long that they just kept doing it. You don't have those obnoxious lift struts that are always losing seal and dropping the hood on your head as a mechanic. That's important to me. Their headlights on their older trucks are horrible. They oxidize, and you just have to buy new ones, because I mean, you can resurface them, but once they start to turn, you know, it's really hard to keep up on them. So that's a headlight thing. As far as toughness and underbody build and just being a good truck, they do a lot of things right, one of which is rivets. And I'm going to see if I can find some rivets for you. You got these big 1-inch rivets, which are a nightmare to work with if you need to pull them off to do a lift kit or radius arm bushings. But they really do a lot to add strength to the vehicle. Those rivets are so incredibly tough. I mean, whereas bolts would snap, whereas you'd have all these other problems, those just really hold up well. One of the ways they cut costs is the frame. The frame isn't boxed in, so you can get frame twist on these. That's kind of a heartbreaker on some occasions, but on the whole they build them pretty tough. You know, that was their whole campaign through the, I don't know if it was since the 50s or what, but you know, they do pretty good. They started to lax up toward the end of the 90s, early 2000s. You started seeing things twist and buckle and bend, you know, under heavy load. You know, but you know, everybody was struggling through that, you know, American auto manufacturers. So, and like I say, they're a business first and foremost. They did what they had to do in terms of sacrifices. What else do I want to tell you? I think that's about it. That's the things to know when you're picking out a truck, and if you're considering Ford. They're not going to be the sexiest truck. I like this body style. Some people may not like this. I think this is gorgeous. I really like it. Dodge did a bunch of trucks the same way with the white stripe down the middle. I think it's pretty good looking. But as far as like the cab of the truck, it's not that sexy. It's not that much different than what they did through the 80s. And you know, if you're a product of the 80s or whatever, it may really turn you on, but it's just not the sexiest thing in the world. It's kind of plain, but it gets the job done. When you got to do body work on any of this, it's really easy to do. You've got these great big flat surfaces. You've got all of these lines where you could cut and seam if you had to, you know, like on a cab corner or whatever. One of the downsides to Ford is the rust. That's an independent thing from the manufacturer, but you know, they got cancer or rust on the wheel wells and rust on the cab corners up in here early on before they did better coatings. And you know, they've come a long way on that. But if you can get a low mileage Ford, they're awesome. They do a great job. Some of the high mileage ones, they even do really well. But you may have some hang-ups. Trying to see if I remembered everything that I wanted to cover in this. I think I covered all the main things. So here's your verse review for the Ford pickups.